have a large family in the world, and I'm very glad to be in the world at this juncture in African history. Once I began to lose my sight, it was a supreme tragedy because I grew up in this state and I read books, mostly books from white people I worked for, who had good libraries they didn't use. So therefore, when I took the books home and they didn't miss them, I didn't bring them back. From an extremely poor family, I grew up with great culture around me, encyclopedias, good dictionaries. I don't know why they had such good literature. They never seemed to read it, never seemed to read a newspaper, but I thank them anyway. But I wanted to say something about eldership in Africa, eldership in the African world. But you got to say something about eldership and its impact on you. Eldership in your own family, eldership in your own surroundings. I've just finished my first big political book. And I have a last chapter that ran in a newspaper in New York, Can African People Save Themselves? Where I take off the gloves and stop being kind and speak like a father. I speak like a loving father, but an angry father. There are certain things people must do for themselves or go out of business as a people. Hang it up. If you don't mean what you say about wanting to be free, stop telling a lie. If you're going to be free in the kind of political wind that's blowing in the world, you have to sustain yourself. You might have to take some steps backward in order to take some steps forward. You might have to look back and realize that you have killed off a lot of messengers because you couldn't understand the nature of the message because the message made you responsible. You might not have thought out the fact that Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm X was all saying the same thing using different words. And there's no debate about which one was right because all of them were right. Talking about self-reliance. But before talking about eldership, I got to look at eldership in my own family because I grew up in a family where eldership was a very respected thing. And my great-grandmother was the Supreme Court. And when things had to be talked over, and she listened and finally handed down her decision. If there was a grumble against the decision, she would stand and tap her cane on the floor. The decision was beyond dispute. And that was the end of it. And that old lady held our family together days of her life, dying at 108 years old, she told me many fantastic stories about growing up. She grew up here in Georgia before she joined the other part of the family in Alabama. She was sold to a plantation in Georgia, and she was so honored. They took her back and sold her back to the same plantation where they bought her. She was in Georgia when Sherman was burning down Atlanta, and she swore she saw him. Eyes redder than a coon. Meanest man she ever saw. What he burning that city for? My main point is that what has influenced my life happen to be 3 elders, all women. And when my grandmother would say, after the death of my mother, when she wanted to say that I was a strong person, I had great potential, that's a good boy, has a little of the girl in him, like his mother Ella. That if you are part woman, you have strength. You've got the combination of both. That wouldn't be understood today, where there's so many mixed signals about manhood. But those first 2 deities were both gone by the time I reached 5th grade and encountered a teacher, Evelina Taylor, the most remarkable teacher I've ever seen in all my life, one who had the greatest influence on my life. She would demonstrate her lessons. She was bug on penmanship and spelling. She was good on drilling. She was good on grammar. And she would put a sentence on the board and put a line on it and say, word, that's an adverb, Miss Taylor. That's a noun, Miss Taylor. We left her, we knew the parts of speech. We could sing it and wake us up in the middle of the night, and we knew it. And she would stagger in front of a classroom once or twice a day. When you see a man walking down the street this way, what would you think? That's a drunkard, Miss Taylor. Same day, same demonstration. We concluded that Miss Taylor was married to a drunkard who deserted her. We never thought Miss Taylor was ever a baby. We never thought Miss Taylor was ever a teenager. We thought Miss Taylor arrived in the world just the way she was. But one thing she instilled in me, the love of the classroom. And once I entered teaching on a regular basis and became chairman of my department and head of several organizations, I knew what I wanted to do most, be a great classroom teacher. can look out at the students I have taught through the years, the large number of doctors, technicians, 3 ambassadors, some heads of Black Studies programs. Only a few weeks ago, some students said that you don't believe in the European concept of heaven or hell. Where you going to go when you die? I said, I ain't going no place. I'm going to stay right here. The physical body of the man is going, but I've left enough minds behind and indoctrinated enough minds, they don't carry on. Teaching is a form of learning. And the one thing I had to learn that broke my heart at first, and yet when I accepted it, I became a much better teacher. All of my classes were oversubscribed for all the years I was at Hunter. The great teacher is in part an entertainer. If you can't get the message across interestingly, no matter how good the message is, it doesn't matter a great deal. You can't fix it in their minds. This might tell you why W.E.B. Du Bois, the greatest single intellect we produced in the whole Western world, could never have been a great mass leader. And his difference of opinion with Marcus Garvey could have been a touch of envy. This man came and did almost overnight what he secretly longed to do, to create a mass movement and lead that mass movement. It had nothing to do with which one was right and which one was wrong, because they were both right. Had different opinions, different things. Now, until we look at eldership in Africa, which is the basis of eldership, and how in spite of slavery we brought it to the United States and lived it out, how culture continuity held the people in the Caribbean islands together until they stopped being African people and became Black Britons and Black French and Black Portuguese and Black Spanish and Black Dutch and Black everything but Africa. Until they forgot that wherever the body of an African person is on the face of the earth, the heartbeat of every African on the face of the earth is in Africa. One thing the European is clear about, his cultural and political heartbeat is in Europe. If you didn't understand it up until a few years ago, you've got no excuse for not understanding it now. And if you have gone like Saturday night, ladies of the evening, searching out European solutions for your problem, you now know how wrong you are, because Europeans have no solutions for European problems. Both capitalism and communism has failed. Democracy and Christianity has failed. I'm not saying I don't believe and you can't use any of them. You can use all of them, but if you use only a European interpretation of them, then they will fail for you too. you must bring your own interpretation and your own concept to everything, then you have to ask some questions about African culture. Why is it that over half of human history was over before Africans knew that a European was in the world? How is it that Africans can build enduring societies that last thousands of years? They didn't have a jail system or a word in their language that meant jail. How is it that the African had great spirituality and had no word in their language that meant G-O-D, God? And yet, he was more spiritual in his approach to the universe than the European had ever been or could be. At what point do we stop this mental prostitution around religions that are man-made and man-oriented by foreigners, and realize that spirituality is the supreme need of all the people who walk this earth, and that all of them can do without? And that all religion is artificial. When you look at the major organized religions of the world, they are all male chauvinist murder cults. When you deserted your system controlled by elders, where the elder was literally the Supreme Court of your family, and began to go into the civil nonsense of the Europeans, you missed the point, because the court system, the customary court system, was not based on European-type evidence. It was based on whether you violated the custom that governs the entire group. And if you violated the custom that governs the entire group, then you have endangered the whole group. And the entire group have a right to call you to task. The leaders, the court was the elders. The electing of a king was the elders, the elder women, the elder men. And yet the lowest and the youngest person could communicate and get his word passed forward. The Africans never used the word democracy, and yet he was democratic. He never found any religious fakeries shouted to the world, "I am my brother's keeper." He just kept it. Because if you have to say, "I am my brother's keeper," I suspect you don't want to keep it. It is time that we study these old systems and study our own family and how we use the concept of the elders in our family. We have not examined our own family. We will use it. We brought the system over. We didn't forget it. We didn't discard it. You remember the days when, no, most of you are not as old as I am. I keep forgetting that. I'm fortunate enough I'm 70 and holding, and I've been holding a few years. But there was a time when the annual visit to grandma was something so desired. If a little boy would start cutting up, if you don't behave yourself, I ain't going to take you to grandma, he'd straighten up and get his little self together. Because he knew he'd go into Grandma and those special hugs, special cookies, the little thing that Grandma had fixed for him during the interim, you know, little pants. She sewed something special for him, made a little shirt for him. I mean, a visit to Grandma, the elder, and to Grandpa, who you're going to fiddle around with him and joke around, josh him around and carry him on his head. I mean, the visit to Grandma and Grandpa was a great event in a child's life. Now, where you going to visit Grandma? In a nursing home? She's depressed. You got a 3-room apartment. Where your grandma going to stay? You're civilized now. You got rid of the one thing that would have done you more good, because she related to the children, she related to you, she related to all those nieces and nephews, and she could pull a girl aside and know what she's misbehaving or not and ask her the obvious questions. Tell her, don't let that boy touch you in a certain way now. In other words, keep your dress down. And Grandma can say it in such a way, you be afraid to think about it. See, what we have lost here in this country, the whole concept of eldership. Now, the most successful slave revolts that we've developed outside of Africa was really in the Caribbean islands. And you study Boatman, in the Haitian revolt, you study eldership. The Kojo in the Maroon revolt in Jamaica, you study eldership. The Kofi in the Babis revolt in Guyana, you study eldership. Then you go to Africa and you study eldership again that continues. When you study the Zulu Wars, you study Mzela Giza broke from Clarke to find the second Zulu empire. And when he made that decision to move over the Drakensberg Mountains, and he suddenly discovered that he had spoken without the consent of the elders, and he prostrated himself. He fell on his feet, on his stomach, and begged forgiveness and said to the old men, I have spoken like a child. I have made a decision without consulting my father. My eyes are weak, you know. They mean I'm crying. This man, a warrior strong enough to break from Clarke, one of the great natural warriors of all time. Strong enough to start the second Zulu Empire, and yet he had made a decision without consulting his elders. It was finally when they gave him permission, and he took that army over and found the second Zulu Empire. Here you see eldership as it's traditionally back. And when, after the death of Clarke's mother, and the Zulus are patrilineal as against matrilineal. In most African people, the lineage comes down to the female side. The Zulus are different. Comes down to the male side. And yet, when Clarke said that there'd be no crops planted for the year in memory of his mother, that was all right. 15,000 people would guard her grave for a year, that was all right. There'd be no laughter. He would punish people even laughing for a year. They took that. He named the cows, and the cows would mourn. That was all right. No matter how they sound with your to your Western mind, this is one of the greatest tributes a man ever paid to the woman who gave him birth. But when he said no cohabitation for a year, the old women said, the elder women said, our king is crazy. We must get rid of him now. And in a patrilineal society, the women made the decision to ceremonies to put Clarke to death. The important is the fact that the decision to ceremonies to put Clarke to death was made by women, the old women, the elder women in the group. Now you see how African eldership operates. I wish we'd read a little more about the Ye Asantewaa story. I lived in Ghana, but Ghana is my home and culture headquarters in Africa. And I've sent this story backward, forward, in all kinds of ways. The story is much more beautiful than the way we know it. That day, and I'm just saying this to put a little garnish on it, when the governor demanded the golden stool, they had exiled Prempeh, her cousin. And now it's 4 years later, and they're now insulting the Ashanti people again by wanting to sit on the stool because the stool is so sacred. Not even a Ashanti king sits on the stool. The word is Asante, not Ashanti. The British always find THs where there are no THs. Hard languages, you know. The Africans, they say Asante, you know, not Ashanti. But be that as it may. When he insulted the Asante people, her sword throwers, spear throwers, came to her and begged for the right to kill the king, to kill the governor. And she said no. Then the others came to beg her to kill the governor. Someone asked her years later, said, inasmuch as you was going to kill the governor anyway, why didn't you give them permission? She said, as I said that this is probably a tribute to the female mind for all time. She said, as I observed the scene, my senior spear throwers were on the other side of the field, and my juniors were closest to the governor. Had I given the order to the juniors, they might have missed him. But had I given it to the seniors, with the children running around, curious about what had happened, they might have hit one of the children. So I told everybody to keep quiet. That morning, her charge to the men was a psychological charge. She was not calling the men cowards. She did not doubt for 1 minute they were going to fight for her. And I wish we'd get all of that speech in once in a while. Hear ye men of Asante, I never thought you would beg for the return of your king. Then she would, you hark back too. Then she would mention the great people of Asante, including the great priest, Kampo Enochi, who needs separate study because he was more than just a chief. He was also the forerunner of the gynecology. Women couldn't conceive. He would have conferences with them, have a special pool for them to bathe in, and he would have a conference with the men. Not a single woman failed to conceive. What he said to the men, history leaves us no record. But every woman conceived after. And he died of his own free will. When he had completed his work, he died, leaving some gold and leaving a sword, and it was a larger story than that. But the main thing, that after that charge, and it was a charge, just like you at half session, the football coach calls in the players to charge them, do better, you know, even accuse them of wearing bloomers. Anything to make them angry enough to get back on that field and win. Because that was all that speech was to do. She had no question about those men fighting with her. They fought with her for 9 months. Not a single man refused. And they won that war. That war was won. Then a great tragedy happened. Forgotten in our history, but we better remember it because that tragedy has happened many times before. After that, and we have gone unnoticed. Black people fighting other black people for white people. What stopped a century war was the famous West Indian Regiment. When she saw them, she said, our brothers from the West have come to help us at last, and none too soon. An Englishman in charge of one flank of the regiment opened fire on her emissaries. And Sergeant Gordon said, I didn't come here to fight my own people, and he held that line. Gordon later went back to Jamaica where hung on some trumped-up charges of murder. It's a bigger story. I wish, but I've spent all my life researching the life of my people, and I've gone nearly every place where they lived and asked questions about this and gone to wakes and weddings and studied life and death. And eldership is something I pay particular attention to how it operates. And in my first wake in Ghana, I noticed that no one, when there's a deceased, the mourning never starts until the elder announces the death of the deceased, because the deceased is not officially dead until he says so. And after he had made the announcement, and after we had then gathered around to celebrate the life of the deceased, and during the morning part, I fell asleep. Then I woke up and it was singing a spiritual, saying the Lord, but they were singing their language. Then I went to their elder, the Garmentia. No, they took me to him because they said, where did you people get this song? Act like a silly American for the first time. Where did you people get this song? When I finally went to the Garmentia, he said, Mr. Clarke, your people left here about 300 years ago. I said, yes, sir. According to our tradition, we've been singing that song about 500 years. And he said, Mr. Clarke, where did your people get this song? Then I began to listen more about men on riverboats, the identical tune of the spiritual call. All of it was right there in Africa. Not only the origin, but the very tune, but in their language. But the main thing is that every structure and every family had eldership. This is why a few years ago when I was asked to give a lecture on the historical basis of black teenage pregnancy, and I did not mention black men at all, did not condemn them because they had nothing to do with what I was talking about. And the black women got so angry, they came there all meek down to me to hang black men to the wall. I didn't even mention one of them. There wasn't no teenage pregnancy in Africa. There were no women beaters in Africa. There were no women deserters in Africa. And why? Eldership. When you married a girl, you married into a family. You dishonored your family by mistreating her, and you dishonored her family too. So you got 10 or 20 uncles to deal with on the other side, 50 cousins to deal with. You got the same thing on this side. It will frighten you even to think of harming her. Before you get your hands up, you can get it down. Because the whole concept of that eldership at the top coming together, both sides of that family, judge and jury. dealing with the situation. Because they kind of put you together in the first place because you couldn't have married without that sanction. I know this don't sound so romantic with you. You like to elope and say that, man, I just love it. But the I love you marriage was a Western invention. You might want it. But I don't know about its workability because when those old people were putting it together, they had a conference on the boy, and before you see the boy and finally decide that that was the best for you, and then introduce you to him, and you finally get together, you got two support systems. Among the Noah, you get the cattle people. Each branch of the family gives 10 cows. The uncles give 10 cows. So you start off your marriage with 30 cows. You probably got some to begin with. My point is that once foreigners came into Africa, misunderstood Africa's concept of spirituality and began to extract from African spirituality a formation that they called religion. Once began to put one religion against the other, they then began to create another religion that I am the true faith, so that means all the rest must be false. Once they began to solicit God to help them in that slave trade, they had made God ungodly. They killed African spirituality in order to create religion. Fortunately, the Africans would not let it die. And I'm saying that going back to eldership in our own family, going back to the concept of the village elder, going back to African methods of electing, going into African customary court and studying the values of a customary court, maybe we will get back some of the things that we lost. Because I think the European fears a people with a value system more than they fear a people with a fierce army. Once we arrive at a decision that we don't do this because we're not that kind of a people, that once we say that we love ourselves so much, we will not put poison in our veins. So if you got some dope to sell it to a dope, and we're not dope. We love ourselves well enough to preserve ourselves. We will end the Saturday night massacre of blacks massacring blacks. We love ourselves so much that we will not live in slums. We will read Booker T. Washington well enough to understand what he was saying. If you live in a brick house, you should own a brick yard. Wear leather shoes, learn how to tan leather, learn how to make shoes. My main point is that our salvation might be in going back to old values, going back to good manners. When is the last time you did something to somebody and said, excuse me, please? When is the last time you said, I'm sorry about something? When is the last time you knew that someone was sick down at the end of the block and make some decent soup or something to go down and help out? Once I gave up organized religion and adopted spirituality, I had to have a way of measuring it to myself. And one way is that I will seek the truth and grow strong enough to live by its consequence, even if its consequence happen to be against me. And I will use my life to do something for someone other than myself every day of my life without requesting any return for having done so. I am doing nothing but going back to an African concept. This concept came out of the concept of eldership. The African thought that there was a force in the universe that made the wind, made the ocean. He knew that that spiritual force was in everything. All living things, trees. And that you really didn't have to go to a church to pray, because the deity and the spiritual force was in everything. If you want to pray, pray to the wind, because God is in the wind. Pray to a river, because God is in the water. Pray to a tree, because God is in the tree. But most important, meditate to yourself, because God is a part of you. When the Europeans came to Africa and started building churches, many Africans laughed when they called it the house of God. The Africans said, God can't fit into that little house. God was big as the wind, big as the sky. He gonna fit into that little place? What are these silly people talking about? God's house. God needs a house as big as the world, because he is as big as the world. I think when people make you laugh at your gods and make you accept the fact that they laugh at your gods, they don't have to build prisoners for you. The continent of Africa is totally undefended. We have been a rather naive people in relationship to nation building. There isn't a truly free nation in Africa today. They're all imitation European states, and poor imitations at that. The European created the nation state. Let him have it. The African created the territorial state. What we need to understand, that the African created a culture container that blended with his culture intention. Wade Noble has given us the comparison of saltwater fish and fresh water. It's a good analogy. There's not enough substance in this society to sustain us, because it is an artificial society. We have to create some of the conditions of salt water symbolically in order to live in this fresh water. We will never thrive completely in a society that reduces us to less than human, because the European is terribly insecure. He is so insecure, he's not safe until he makes other people feel insecure. I'm saying, and I'm going to conclude with this because there really is no conclusion. that we have to take a good look at what we are and how we relate. We have to take a good look at our enemies, and maybe we need to call for white studies programs also. What makes a people so sick that they think they've got to dominate everything in the world? You're in an enviable position. You should have prepared yourself to rescue Africa. Once you rescue Africa in the islands of the Pacific, and once you realize that there's maybe 1 billion African people on the face of this earth, if we want to build an economic system, at least 1/3 of all those people can be working, making goods and services for each other. Then we have to start someplace. Then suppose we say we won't wear any shoes we don't make. Look how many shoe factories we'd have to open. We won't eat any food that didn't come from one of our farms. Look how many farms we have to put in action. We won't even bury our beloved ones in a coffin we didn't make. We take the coffin business away from the mafia. Look how many coffin factories we'd have to have. I suggest that that is a starting point. And let's start with an item no one's looking at. Let's start by saying we will wear no underwear we don't make. Now, what excuse do you have for not taking care of that one item? Let's begin our road towards self-reliance. That one item of people who cannot make their underwear cannot rule a nation. Why did I choose underwear? It's covered up. Only your private person, your beloved person got in the business looking at it. And she or he can say, dear, the seams are not straight. We better make better underwear. And you know how well we like to look pretty dressed and partly dressed. Our underwear makers will get on the job and make the prettiest stuff. You want to wear it to a party. My main point is that while eldership is the basis of it all, there is no solution for us coming out of Europe, because nothing the European mind devised was ever meant to do anything other than to facilitate European control over the world. The European is clear about this. You have confusion. He divides nothing from no one. This is why, with all the great admiration I have for Nelson Mandela, I detect more than a touch of political naivete if he thinks he's going to build a non-racial society in South Africa. Everywhere in the world the European goes, he will rule or run. And he is clear about that. He didn't go into anybody's country for them to rule. He goes to take what he wants to. And to run it if he can't run it. The greatest imperial nation in the world today is the United States. The United States, more than any other nation, helped to kill the African independent explosion, to keep any of these nations from being stable. Now, what are we going to do? Affect a wedding between the African away from home and the Africans at home. The Africans in Africa might be the lock, might hold a lock to Africa's future. But I think the African away from home might have the key. While fighting for our oppressor, while working for our oppressor, for fighting for in our oppressor's war, we are the best trained people in the world in combined operational military technique, land, air, and sea. Living in a highly technical nation, we develop so much technology just by living here. We must combine our respective talents in a nationalist and pan-Africanist method that will change the face of Africa and subsequently the face of the world, and we can do this without conquering anyone's nation and without threatening any nation outside of the African sphere of influence. We're the only people who have that great opportunity to do that. We stand at the brink of a new age of man. We need to start that process of dynamic change. I say if you want an ally, find a mirror. And don't move from that mirror until you like what's staring back at you. Then you say to what's staring back at you, if you have any understanding of revolution, you and I will start a revolution that will change the world. We might start it tomorrow. But if you're truly sincere and understand the nature of revolution and the urgency of revolution, you will say, you and I will start our revolution today.